We can't close in G major at this point, not after the way we had it in the opening. But he's got to close this somehow. So instead, what? E major. He's really just pasted this on. Mahler's Fourth Symphony was written in 1899 to 1900, and that's a time when the symphonic form was really being pushed further than it had ever been pushed before. In the early 19th century, you would have had a four-movement structure that started with a fast sonata form movement. You then would have had your slow movement adagio. Then there would have been a minuet and trio or a scherzo, and it would have ended again with another fast movement, such as a rondo. What Mahler does is he takes these slow movements and he gives them far more structural importance. He starts to connect them to the outer movements. They become far more than incidental, relaxing pieces to sort of give you a break from the outer movements. Mahler makes it so that all four movements have equal significance. The Fourth Symphony starts in G major, and it ends in E major. It doesn't start and end in the same key. So it's called progressive tonality. And actually this slow movement, the third movement of the symphony, also does the same thing. So starts in G major and ends in E major. And that's really significant for a slow movement. So he's really already sort of connecting this slow movement to those outer movements by giving it the same tonal trajectory as the symphony as a whole. The movement opens in G major. It's marked Ruhevol, which means peaceful in German, and it's an adagio, it's nice and slow. You've got an opening cantilena in the cellos. The music itself is riddled with perfect cadences, so movements from the dominant down to the tonic. It really adds to this sense that we've not really started at the beginning. It's almost like we're preparing to close. It's almost as if the music is sort of littered with full stops. And there are a number of inattentions within the harmony here that get resolved quite quickly, and again that adds to this whole feeling that we've not started with the opening, that actually this is just leading towards some sort of closure. And there were a variation of that main theme. You can hear that in the violins at the top. It adds a little bit of variety to the melodic material, but ultimately we're still in G major here. We don't move away from that key at any point in these opening 45 bars. And each time a new section within this opening part begins, again we've got another of those perfect cadences that's really emphasised and just adds to that sense of closure. And we're now descending towards the tonic. So we're moving back to G in the upper melody and reinforcing it down there in the bass. But the tempo is still very slow, it's getting a lot slower. We really feel here as if we're wrapping something up, but we've only just begun. And there's the first resolution, the full resolution of G major. So we've got a quotation here that's actually come from Wagner's Parsifal. And I think that external material is actually what allows any movement beyond this point to happen. Because otherwise, we could just end here. But Mahler's not in the habit of writing 5-minute movements. It's really slowing down and we're moving towards the big perfect cadence. And you could almost end it there. Instead, the movement does move onwards. We get a repeat of that opening theme a number of times throughout the structure, and there is a secondary theme that builds on the material of that first theme as well. Both themes alternate and they move through increasing variations, but every time that we hear that opening section, that idea of closure, of the cadence happening so neatly, so perfectly, is undermined significantly and increasingly each time that material comes back. They get faster in tempo, they start to become more and more frustrated. There are a number of plunge-like climaxes that almost feel very superficial as we're going through the various keys in this inner section, before we arrive at that final A section that has become almost like a parody of closure. It's trying, it's sort of striving towards where it was at the beginning, but it will never get that back. We'll never sort of have that closure in such a perfect form again. So instead, you've got this pure parody of closure. This is the Parsifal quotation again in the horns. So we're back to that string resolution from the opening, where you've got the high strings descending slowly down towards the tonic of G. But the real problem of this movement is how to close when we had it in the opening. So instead it's just rocking between that B and A. It's never going to fall to the G because we can't close in G major at this point after we had it so perfectly in the opening. So instead, E major. We're in E major at this point. This is so different from where we started. It's just a real parody of closure. You've got triangles, you've got timpani, you've got demi-semiquavers in the strings, you've got it all going on in E major, really importantly. And that's how he chooses to end this movement. He can't get that final G. He can't drop back down to the tonic because he had it at the beginning in those first 45 bars. So instead, he's got to close it any way that he can. And what he actually does is just give a real anticipation of the finale, this apotheosis in E major that just leaves you wanting more straight into the finale, again in E major.